Welcome back to the podcast. Today's episode, we're going to be diving into one of the most common issues people deal with, but is often very much misunderstood, and that is fatigue. Because you might be sleeping, I hear it all the time, 7, 8, even 9 hours, yet you still feel exhausted. So we're going to go beyond just what happens with sleep deprivation and go into the root causes of persistent fatigue and what you can do about them so you can unlock limitless energy. So we're going to cover first kind of the science behind fatigue, nothing too nerdy, why you feel tired even with enough sleep, then how macronutrients play a role and micronutrient deficiencies, how undereating or lacking key nutrients can drain your energy. We'll go into the hormonal dysregulation side of things, so the role of your sex hormones, insulin, thyroid function. We'll go into chronic stress and the HPA axis, how chronic stress leads to energy crashes. We'll get into gut health and fatigue connection, why your digestion could be playing a role, how your lifestyle and potentially overtraining could be contributing to your fatigue. So finding the right balance for optimal energy. And lastly, sleep, because that will play a massive role, of course, quality over quantity, understanding sleep apnea, stimulants, circadian rhythm. And to start off, I want to go over a little bit of the science about fatigue, because it isn't just about how much you sleep, because that's usually the culprit. You wake up, you're tired, you're just probably thinking, oh, I must have not slept that good, which could very well be the case. But if this is a persistent thing, if you have your sleep pretty dialed in, then it could be a multi-system issue that can be affected by neurotransmitters, inflammation, hormonal balance, and nutrient status as well. So if you're still waking up with low energy and you have low energy throughout the day, even with your sleep dialed in, which literally that is pillar number one. If you don't have your sleep dialed in, it's pretty much a no-brainer. You're going to feel fatigued. But if you're still tired and fatigued, this is because there are quite a few systems at play that can contribute to fatigue. And even if you're logging enough hours in bed, your body might not be restoring itself properly due to some underlying biological and lifestyle factors we're going to get into later in this episode. So, at the core, fatigue is the brain's ability to regulate wakefulness and energy. Neurotransmitters like dopamine and acetylcholine play key roles in alertness, motivation. So, if these are low, it is very common to feel sluggish, unmotivated, mentally foggy as well, a little bit of brain fog. Similarly, we have norepinephrine and epinephrine, our body's natural stimulants that help us feel alert. And if those neurotransmitters drop, energy levels will follow. But the problem is that these brain chemicals, they don't operate in isolation. They are influenced by a ton of processes, including mitochondrial function, oxygen delivery, blood sugar regulation. Your stress, of course, will play a massive role. So starting with one of the biggest contributors to fatigue, which in my opinion is mitochondrial dysfunction, because the mitochondria are what are responsible for producing ATP, which is essentially the body's energy currency. So when the mitochondria aren't functioning well due to you have high levels of oxidative stress, not enough antioxidants to combat that, you have toxic exposure. Like in my case, I had mold toxicity, which did not help, and it essentially poisons your mitochondria because it's a toxin. So that was contributing to my low energy, which I had to work through. Nutrient deficiencies. If you have any of those, ATP production is going to be suboptimal. And then alongside, if you say you're carrying a toxic load, that will contribute to inflammation, potentially brain inflammation or neuroinflammation, which can disrupt, again, neurotransmitter production and signaling, thus making it harder to feel alert and engaged throughout the day. So you can kind of see how one trickles down into the other and how everything's kind of connected. Now, another major factor is actually blood flow and oxygenation. So if your brain isn't getting enough oxygen, whether that's due to anemia or circulatory issues or poor cardiovascular health, fatigue is almost a given. Same applies to blood sugar regulation. If your glucose levels are like going up and down like a roller coaster throughout the day due to, let's say, insulin resistance or a very poor diet, you will no doubt experience crashes throughout the day. So we kind of just scratched the surface there, but this was just more to show you that there are a few physiological factors that impact your energy. So you can now see that it's not just poor sleep, because fatigue can be a complex issue with multiple potential causes. So addressing it requires more of like a holistic approach that includes proper nutrition, paying attention to your hormones, stress management, gut health optimization, movement, and then of course, high quality sleep. Now, throughout this episode, we're going to break down each one of those components so you can kind of pinpoint what's draining your energy and then how to fix it. Starting with one of the most common and overlooked causes of fatigue, which is poor nutrition, and this is the baseline. If you're not eating enough food overall, or if your diet lacks key micronutrients, your body won't have the necessary resources it needs to produce energy efficiently. And this is why chronic dieting leads to REDS, relative energy deficiency in sports, and extreme caloric restriction. So being in a deficit for too long or crashing your calories will lead to fatigue and a bunch of downregulation that occurs in your body. Then on top of that, if you have poor food quality, not conducive to having a good amount of energy because you're lacking the micronutrients needed for energy in the first place. So let's start with macros first. So we got our carbohydrates, we got our fats, we got our proteins. They do all play a role in some respect to maintaining steady energy levels, because carbohydrates, to start with, they provide you with that quick energy and they also help regulate blood sugar. Fats, they kind of support long-term energy production by partly fueling the mitochondria. Carbs do that as well. Then protein, essential for neurotransmitter synthesis. But then beyond our macros, we got micros, which deficiencies, far bigger player when it comes to people struggling with fatigue, because most people get the required amount of each macro. However, it is extremely common to not get the required amounts of the micronutrients. One being the B vitamin complex. B1, B5, B6, B12 all play direct roles in ATP production, neurotransmitter function as well. Vitamin D, another one, influences serotonin and dopamine levels, also supports mitochondrial health, and a fair amount of people are deficient in vitamin D. Then we got iron, which if you're deficient leads to anemia, one of the most common causes of extreme fatigue, especially, this is more pertinent in women. You don't tend to see it as much in males, but it can be a player for sure, likely due to poor gut health, leading to an absorption issue. But essentially, without enough iron, oxygen delivery to your tissues becomes impaired, which is one of the main drivers of fatigue. Magnesium is another essential mineral that's required for ATP activation, meaning that even if your body produces enough energy, you might not be able to use it effectively if you're deficient in magnesium, which is another super common deficiency. It's involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body, and I believe the stat is roughly about, last I read, don't quote me on this, 60% of Americans are deficient, which even if that's remotely close, that is a massive number of people walking around literally operating at, say, 50% of their potential. And one of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to improve their energy and combat their nutrient deficiencies is relying solely on stimulants like caffeine or potentially Adderall or modafinil instead of addressing those nutrient deficiencies. And while caffeine and stimulants can definitely provide a temporary fix, it's like a band-aid. It doesn't fix the root cause of your fatigue, and then downstream can even make things potentially worse if it disrupts your sleep or increases stress hormone production or keeps you in that fight or flight sympathetic drive. So this begs the question, what is the best approach to addressing fatigue? Well, first, from a nutritional standpoint, very easy. Focus on a nutrient-dense diet with plenty of whole foods. We got, lean proteins, you got your healthy fats, wide variety of fruits and vegetables. Then, if necessary, targeted supplementation can be useful, but it should always be secondary to a well-balanced diet. And to rule this out, number one, get your blood work done, because that will allow you to pinpoint what might be causing your fatigue so you can address it basically without any guesswork. Basically get like a fast pass to you're getting your energy back. And number two, what you can do today, right now, download the app Chronometer, log your diet in there. It's literally exactly like MyFitnessPal, but it will show you your micronutrient intake along with your macros and your electrolytes as well. So you can get a clear picture of your micronutrient intake, then adjust your diet accordingly to hit your needs. Or if you see you're lacking in specific vitamins, you can then backfill with supplementation to then hit your needs. So beyond diet, we got to touch on hormones because they play a very, very big role regulating energy, and imbalances can lead to persistent fatigue, even if sleep and nutrition are on point. So three of the most important hormones in this context are our sex hormones, being testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. We got insulin, and then we also have thyroid hormones. When any of these are out of balance, energy production, your overall well-being, your mental health can and will likely take a major hit. So starting with the sex hormones, none other than testosterone, which you probably know, the key hormone for both men and women, I would say, when it comes to energy, motivation, recovery, your ability to build muscle, drive, etc., has a profound effect on neurotransmitters like dopamine, which influences motivation, drive, your overall mood. And then when you have low testosterone, which is common in now younger and younger men, which is scary, due to largely poor lifestyle choices, chronic stress, poor nutrition, excess body fat, micronutrient deficiencies, especially in vitamin D, magnesium, and zinc, can cause chronic fatigue, brain fog, poor motivation, drive, basically all the stuff you'd want if you want to progress your life forwards and have a good quality of life as well. So that brings us to insulin resistance. Insulin being responsible for moving glucose into the cells for energy. So when insulin sensitivity is high, which is good, cells can efficiently use glucose for ATP production, which will lead to stable energy levels. However, when insulin resistance develops, glucose remains in the bloodstream instead of entering the cells, which then causes common energy crashes. Some people get brain fog, some persistent fatigue, and this is why many people with prediabetes or metabolic syndrome or PCOS experience low energy levels despite eating enough food. So the key to improving insulin sensitivity is a combination of resistance training. Proper carbohydrate timing does play a role. Stress management is huge. Adequate sleep is huge. And then the biggest driver, maintaining a healthy body fat percentage and also doing your cardio. Now, the last hormone that I'll touch on, which I've had personal experience with, are the thyroid hormones, which regulate metabolism. They 100% play a major role in your energy levels, your mental health as well. Because if your thyroid function is low, meaning you have hypothyroidism or subclinical hypothyroidism, which is what I had, ATP production slows down, you're going to have less energy, your metabolism is going to go down, meaning you now have to eat less food, even if you have a physique-driven goal, and fatigue becomes a pretty constant struggle. So some symptoms of low thyroid function include slower digestion, you could have hair thinning, cold hands and feet, weight gain, difficulty concentrating, and the most common cause of hypothyroidism is actually Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune condition in which the immune system attacks the thyroid gland. But for most people, low levels of iodine, selenium, and zinc can also impair thyroid function. So again, download Chronometer, make sure you're hitting those needs for those three. And unfortunately, most doctors conventionally only test for TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, but a full thyroid panel, including free T3, free T4, reverse T3, thyroid antibodies as well, which mine were through the roof, is essential for getting a complete picture of thyroid health and then being able to address the root cause and actually fix it, not just mask it with a medication. And something that would have saved me so much time feeling just in the gutter because I couldn't actually get those tests done to actually see the full picture and what the root cause of my subclinical hypothyroidism was. So if you're low in testosterone, if you have high estrogen, if you have insulin resistance or hypothyroidism, those are all going to be contributing to fatigue. And a comprehensive approach that includes hormone testing, strategic nutrition, proper training, stress management is the best path to restoring your energy levels. And then if you have an issue, addressing it at the root cause level. Now, beyond the under the hood stuff, for some people, their fatigue could just literally be due chronic stress, because stress affects the body through the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which controls the release of cortisol, adrenaline, other stress hormones as well. So when stress is properly managed, when you're chill, you're zen, you're in a good state, everything's clicking, cortisol, it's going to help regulate wakefulness, it's going to help regulate inflammation, metabolism as well. However, when stress becomes chronic, when you're just tripping out all the time, the HPA axis can then become dysregulated. And that's when issues start to present themselves. So initially, when someone experiences high stress, whether that be from work, could be from training, under eating, could be from poor sleep, could be just like life, the body responds by elevating cortisol levels, and that leads to a temporary boost in energy and alertness, which is why some people initially thrive under stress. However, as this goes on over time, if stress is not properly managed, the brain downregulates cortisol production in an attempt to protect the body from chronic overstimulation, which is what people often call adrenal fatigue, although a more accurate term is HPA axis dysfunction. But symptoms of low cortisol would just be constant exhaustion, poor waking energy, poor motivation, reliance on stimulants like caffeine, and it's pretty common for individuals experiencing burnout to find themselves wired but tired. So you're unable to relax at night, but then struggling to get out of bed in the morning. Also something I dealt with, still on the back end of it, to be fair. But beyond chronic fatigue, chronic stress also has a profound impact on blood sugar levels, which, like we covered, impacts your energy quite significantly, your inflammation, and gut health, which we will definitely get to. But in my experience, it's not like I thought my total stress load was unmanageable. It was due to one of the biggest stressors people don't realize, which is overtraining. Because while exercise extremely powerful tool for reducing stress and improving insulin sensitivity and has a whole host of positive outcomes, doing too much, especially without adequate recovery, or something like in my case, just draining my recovery capacity under the hood, we could call it. Let's say you have poor sleep as well. This can lead to a chronic cortisol elevation, and then over time, without being addressed, HPA axis dysfunction, especially if you compare this with a caloric deficit. So if you think you may be in this situation, we can take some steps to fix HPA axis dysfunction and restore energy, which are the following. First, got to reduce the stress itself. So that could be training. If you're doing excessive HIIT, tons of cardio, I'd swap some of those for low intensity movement. You have to prioritize sleep, which will regulate blood sugar. You can manage stress through breath work and mindfulness. So simple things like downloading the app State, doing 2 minutes of guided breath work before meals, maybe doing some Qigong, which if you haven't looked that up, you'll feel pretty funny doing that a couple first times. But look it up on YouTube. Qigong. There's a dude in a I don't know what it's called, but some robe looking thing. He'll walk you through it, get your nervous system nice and relaxed in that parasympathetic state. Walking in nature as well is great, and meditation will all help regulate the nervous system, kind of bring your body back to that parasympathetic state. And from there, we can look into strategic supplementation. So once you got those nailed, adaptogens like ashwagandha, rhodiola, phosphatidylserine, they can all support HPA axis function and kind of help regulate cortisol levels as well. And then definitely don't miss hydration and electrolytes, because chronic stress depletes magnesium, sodium, potassium, which are essential for energy production. So ensuring you're properly hydrated is a must for stabilizing nervous system function. Now, I also want to touch on the link between gut health and fatigue, and how your gut could potentially be the culprit, or definitely be playing a role into your energy levels. So we've covered nutrition, hormones, chronic stress, which all tie into each other, of course. They're also tightly linked to gut health, because if your gut is off, chances are your energy will be too, because the gut isn't just responsible for breaking down food, absorbing nutrients. It also plays a major role in immune function. It houses 75% of our immune system. Neurotransmitter production as well. A ton of serotonin produced in the gut. It regulates inflammation and also plays a role in metabolic health. And one of the primary ways poor gut health contributes to fatigue is through nutrient malabsorption. So even if you're eating a diet, let's say you got your diet on point, nutrient dense, whole foods, if your gut isn't absorbing those vitamins and minerals efficiently, your body won't have the necessary building blocks for ATP production, for neurotransmitter synthesis, for mitochondrial function, all the things we need to have high energy. And two of the most common gut-related nutrient deficiencies that contribute to fatigue are iron and B12 deficiencies. Iron, like we covered, essential for oxygen transport in the blood. So without enough iron, your body's going to struggle to deliver oxygen to the muscle tissues and your brain as well. And this is why individuals with low ferritin levels often feel exhausted despite getting enough sleep. Then low stomach acid as well, common gut issue that reduces iron absorption. This is particularly in individuals dealing with either chronic stress, H. pylori infections, which are quite common, or long-term use of acid-reducing medications. Then B12, another critical player in energy metabolism that relies on proper gut function for absorption. So if you have gut dysbiosis, if you have low stomach acid, conditions like IBS, Crohn's, or SIBO, you might not be absorbing enough B12, even if your diet contains enough of it. But then beyond nutrient absorption, gut inflammation and leaky gut, also known as intestinal permeability, which is essentially our gut lining, which acts as a protective barrier. It's supposed to look like tight junctions. It prevents harmful toxins, bacteria, undigested food particles from entering the bloodstream. But what that gut lining becomes compromised. So the tight junctions start to open up due to chronic stress or processed foods or alcohol or antibiotics or food sensitivities. All those toxins, those bacteria can enter the bloodstream that trigger chronic systemic inflammation, and they activate your immune system as well. And this inflammatory response can be a big player for fatigue. It can disrupt neurotransmitter balance. It can increase cortisol levels, and it will absolutely take a massive hit on your energy levels over time. And many individuals with autoimmune conditions often experience gut-related inflammation as a root cause of their symptoms. And there is another link between gut health and fatigue, which is the gut-brain connection. because the gut produces a significant portion of the body's serotonin and dopamine. So when one has an imbalanced gut microbiome, this can potentially lead to low serotonin production. It can lead to increased anxiety, mental fatigue, and this is why people with poor digestion often experience not just low physical energy, but also mental fatigue and brain fog. But while it does take a pretty comprehensive approach to solve some of these issues, we can 100% take some very easy steps to improve our gut health for better energy, which are the following. First, like we covered already, eat a diverse diet, a wide range of fibers, prebiotics, fermented foods, reduce your processed food intake and inflammatory triggers like potential food sensitivities, which can be commonly gluten, dairy, artificial sweeteners, seed oils for some that may contribute to gut inflammation. Then we want to manage stress. See how it's full circle. High stress, high cortisol suppresses digestion. So a great practice, like I said, 2 minutes of guided breathwork using the app State before meals can go a very long way. Then we want to look to optimize our fiber intake by including soluble and insoluble fiber from sources like vegetables, fruits, to support our gut motility as well. Now, I also want to touch on finding the right balance with your training demands because, like I said, overtraining can contribute to chronic fatigue, and training, very powerful tool for all positive outcomes, increasing energy, improving insulin sensitivity, regulating your mood. However, there is a point where too much can contribute to fatigue and burnout because overtraining and excessive high intensity exercise can be extremely draining because when your training volume and intensity are too high without adequate recovery to match that for too long, you're pushing beyond overreaching to overtraining, which I have to say, this is not going to be common at all. However, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And that'll lead to your elevated resting heart rate, disrupted sleep, chronic muscle soreness, increased cravings for sugar, stimulants, hormonal imbalances like low testosterone, a poor DHA to cortisol ratio, a disrupted cortisol rhythm. And if you have a dysregulated circadian rhythm, that itself is going to be a big stress, but it can also manifest from overtraining. So the key is to match your training volume and intensity with your personal recovery capacity. If you're constantly exhausted, if you're sore, if you're relying on caffeine to push through workouts, if your numbers are regressing in the gym, which is, by the way, the easiest way to tell if you're recovering, maybe time to scale back your volume, increase rest days, and start to prioritize recovery a little bit more. So to optimize energy levels when it comes to training, we want to incorporate daily low intensity movement. So at a baseline for health, 8 to 12,000 steps per day. We want to strength train 3 to 5 times per week, focusing on progressive overload, not excessive volume. We want to prioritize recovery by having rest days and proper sleep. Then we want to balance cardio intelligently because too much high intensity cardio like HIIT, like long distance running, done too many times a week can lead to more fatigue if you're pairing that with resistance training and inadequate recovery as well. Now, the reality is that this is highly dependent person to person. Some people will be able to get away with doing a ton and others not so much. So listen to your biofeedback. This is where it becomes super important. If you're waking up exhausted, if you're feeling wired at night, if you're struggling to recover, reduce your intensity and prioritize recovery. So the last part of this I want to cover that will play a role into your energy, play a massive role, and often is the culprit for fatigue. But on the opposite end, when you have it optimized, you will have so much energy, and that is optimizing your sleep quality, optimizing your circadian rhythm, and managing your stimulant intake. Because when people struggle with fatigue, one of the first things they look at, how many hours of sleep did I get last night? I feel pretty shitty, got 6 hours last night, makes sense. Or feel pretty shitty, got 8.5, 9 hours last night, why do I still feel pretty shitty? And while sleep duration, 100% important, sleep quality matters just as much, if not more. So you could be in bed for 8 to 9 hours, but you're still waking up feeling exhausted, groggy, sluggish, if your sleep quality is poor. And there are several key factors that influence sleep quality, including sleep apnea, stimulant use, especially later in the day, and circadian rhythm dysfunction. Now, sleep apnea, one of the most overlooked causes of fatigue, and many people don't realize they have it actually. It is essentially a condition where you basically stop breathing periodically throughout the night. And this is going to lead to disrupted sleep cycles. So you're not getting into the deep restorative stages of sleep. And you're also literally destroying your brain cells because you're cutting off oxygen to the brain. So some of the most common signs of sleep apnea, and you can get it tested pretty easily by doing a sleep study, are if you have any of the following: loud snoring, choking sounds during sleep, frequent wake ups. Sometimes you don't even realize it, to be honest. Morning headaches, waking up with a dry mouth, which is a good sign you're mouth breathing, which is a complete no no. Excessive fatigue throughout the day, like literally falling asleep at your desk, brain fog as well, memory issues, or difficulty focusing. And one of the biggest risk factors for sleep apnea is just being overweight, as the excess weight around the neck can restrict airflow. However, it is worth mentioning, even lean and athletic individuals can develop sleep apnea, particularly if they have like narrow airways, nasal congestion, or even just like poor sleep posture. And the problem with undiagnosed sleep apnea is that it increases everything negative, everything deleterious, inflammation, cortisol, disrupts metabolic function. And over time, it'll lead to hormonal imbalances, insulin resistance, definitely chronic fatigue. So if you suspect you have sleep apnea, simple thing, just get a test done. You can do a sleep study to determine whether you need to do any interventions to improve oxygen flow and restore your sleep quality at night. Now, the likelihood that you have sleep apnea, if you're listening to this, because most of you guys are 22 to 30, which is what the YouTube analytics tell me, is quite low. So moving on to caffeine, which, don't get me wrong, I love my coffee, my cold brews, but excessive stimulant use can significantly disrupt sleep quality because everybody metabolizes caffeine at a different rate, but caffeine has a half-life of 5 to 7 hours, meaning if you have that coffee at 2 p.m., half that caffeine is still in your system by bedtime. And while some people can claim, yeah, I can fall asleep just fine after drinking caffeine. I'll have a coffee right before bed and I'll be chilling. Studies show that caffeine reduces deep sleep and REM sleep, which are the most important sleep stages for physical and mental recovery. And this means even if you're sleeping a full 8 hours, your sleep is going to be fragmented and far less restorative. So, this begs the question, let's optimize our sleep quality. First, cut off caffeine at least 6 to 8 hours before bedtime. And for more, if you're a caffeine sensitive individual, I'd cut it off by noon, which is what I personally do, or use a supplement, let's get into biohacking, called rutacarpine, which actually speeds up the metabolism of caffeine, which I've been playing around with. So the last part to optimizing your energy or fixing your fatigue lies in what's known as your circadian rhythm, which is your body's internal 24-hour clock. And this rhythm controls when you feel awake, when you feel sleepy, when certain hormones like melatonin and cortisol are released into your bloodstream. So if your circadian rhythm is dysregulated, your sleep quality will suffer, even if you're in bed for 8 hours. And there are several common habits that contribute to circadian misalignment that are extremely common. First being inconsistent sleep and wake time. If your bedtime is sporadic, your body never gets into a stable rhythm, or if it's on point during the week, but completely thrown out the window Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you're basically inducing jet lag on a weekly basis, which is a massive stress on the body. Next is exposure to blue light at night, whether that is from your phone, your TV, laptop, suppresses melatonin production, make it much harder to fall asleep. Then not getting morning sunlight or enough sunlight during the day at all, which is super common, but sunlight exposure in the first part of your day, especially within that 30 minutes upon wake, massive. It'll help set your circadian rhythm. It'll support your morning cortisol rise, which is super important. We want your cortisol curve to be on point, meaning rises in the morning. We want to support that with morning sunlight, then tapers off in the evening. And we want to support that with light hygiene. Next is eating too close to bedtime, which disrupts digestion, delays melatonin release. It'll definitely impact your sleep quality. So try to get your last meal in 2.5 to ideally 3 hours before bed. And to optimize your circadian rhythm, which everybody should try to do because it'll literally transform your life. You'll get better sleep. You'll have improved sleep quality. You'll feel more refreshed in the morning. You'll feel better throughout the day. You'll have an easier time falling asleep. And that is going to bed and waking up at the same time every day, even on weekends. And then the more consistent you can be, the better. So that's not to say every single weekend if you go out that's a problem. However, if you're going out, let's say 2 nights out of the weekend and you're sleeping in and you're just, like I said, inducing jet lag, big problem. So even if you go out, still wake up at your normal time. That is a big point here. Next, super simple to do. Get sunlight in the morning, maybe pair it with a morning walk, which is great. Bring some water with electrolytes. You will set off a cascade of effects that will improve your mood, your energy, your focus, performance, and the list goes on throughout your day, which is a perfect way to start your day. Then your sleep at night as well, because now your body will release melatonin at the right time. So get up, get outside, and then at night, limit blue light. So either reduce screen time, an hour, 2 hours-ish before bed, or use blue light blocking glasses to prevent melatonin suppression. Also, bright lights as well. Your skin actually has photoreceptors, so you're going to want to dim those bright lights, especially those bright overhead lights. Maybe switch to red light if you want to be super optimal, or just warmer shades of light. Also, like I said, avoid eating large meals before bed, and create a good sleep environment. So we want a bat cave. Bedroom cool, around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, or around just 18 degrees Celsius. We want it dark, and we want it quiet. And lastly, a pre-bed routine. So a consistent wind-down routine will go a long way. I'm a big fan of creating a morning routine and a bedtime routine. Just either end of your day, which is something I do with clients, because when you can nail the first hour of your day and the last, let's say, hour and a half, 2 hours of your day, everything in between becomes profoundly better. So that is a wrap on today's podcast. I know we covered a lot in this one, got into the nitty-gritty on fatigue, some of the root causes, how nutrition, sleep, lifestyle factors, gut health, how stress plays a role, then how to optimize each of them so you can wake up and have limitless energy, feel like $1,000,000 every day, become superhuman. Because the reality is you're supposed to feel good. Most people actually don't know what normal feels like because they're operating at 20%. So if you want to take your physique, your health, and performance to the next level, you can inquire for one-to-one coaching below. If you want 30 days of free transformation advice to fast track your results, you can click the first link in the description. And I appreciate you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.